Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me again. This is Tim Laskus, and you're listening to The Tim Laskus Show. This is episode 99, and today's featured guest is Mark Podolsky. Now, Mark he calls himself the land geek because he focuses on buying and selling land. He knows everything about that. He has done about over 5,000 land deals since about 2001 when he started doing it full time. And he shares some great tips and strategies in this episode of how to buy and how to sell and make some passive income with raw land, which is great. You know, I love property. And I just also have to make a correction in this episode. I share a story about who I said was Carlton Cheese on a yacht in a marina that had our small Ricky-Dink sailboat in Daytona Beach. But it was actually Charles Givens. When I thought about this later, I'm like, that wasn't Carlton Cheese. That was Charles Givens. And so I just wanted to make that correction. This was like back in the early 1990s. So it's been a while. But I just wanted to make that correction. It was not Carlton Cheese. It was Charles Givens who had his yacht parked docked on the end of our dock. And he used to throw some wild parties. So I share that little story on this episode. But I hope you enjoy.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests. Entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Hey, Mark, thanks for joining me today.
Tim, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, you were just sharing with me that you're out in Arizona. What are you doing for fun out there when you're not working?
So I just got done with a bike ride, actually. You know, this time of year, it's beautiful in the morning. And I've got 3 kids, and so, you know, we like to do activities, hike and bike and swim. That's kind of the majority of it. And then summer is all about getting out of Arizona and traveling.
Get out of the heat.
Get out of the heat. Exactly.
For sure. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, and sounds like you love to be outside, but tell the listeners a little bit about yourself professionally. What are you currently working on?
So I've got 3 companies. I've got the land investing company where I buy and sell raw land. And I can kind of talk to you about how I do that. Then I've got the education company, which is Land Geek, which teaches people how to create a passive income without the headaches of typical real estate. So no renters or rehabs or renovations or rodents. And then I have a software startup called geekpay.io that I kind of scratched my own itch. And I teach people, or I don't teach people, I help people automate collecting money when they're doing owner financing or even breaking up payments.
Got you. Well, let me ask you about the buying, selling raw land. Are the typical mortgage terms and being able to get a loan the same when buying raw land as it is when you're buying an actual structure, a home?
So no, you can't borrow money from a bank for raw land typically, unless you're going to get, I guess you could borrow up to 50%, but most banks don't like raw land. It used to be that way until about 2008. You could borrow about 50%. Now most banks will let you borrow. So the way that my model works is, Tim, where do you live?
South Carolina.
So you're in South Carolina. So let's say that I go and I see that there's, Tim Laskus owes $200 in back taxes on this property in Texas. And I can see on your address, you live in South Carolina. So what I'll do is I'll look at the comparable sales for that raw land in Texas. And I see, they're selling for about $10,000. So what I'll do is I'll divide by 4, and that gives me what Warren Buffett would call 300% margin of safety. And I'll send you an offer of $2,500 for your parcel in Texas. Well, you live in South Carolina. You owe $200 in back taxes. You're already advertising to me you don't value the property anymore. Otherwise, you would have paid your taxes, right? Or maybe you're distressed in some way.
Right.
And you have no emotional attachment to the property because you don't even live near it. So 3 to 5% of people will accept this quote-unquote top dollar offer. Then we go through our due diligence, make sure that there's legal access, that you actually own the property, that the back taxes aren't too high, there's no liens or encumbrances, all this stuff in a checklist, right? And then we buy the property, and then, Tim, we have a best built-in buyer for that property to sell it 30 days or less. Guess who it is?
Who is it?
The neighbors.
The neighbors.
So we send out neighbor letters saying, before we send this out to the general market, we're going to give you first crack at buying the neighboring lot. Expand your holdings. Make your banker feel happier about it. Protect your view. And then oftentimes the neighbors will buy that property. But if they don't, then we'll go to our buyers list. And if the buyers list doesn't buy it, then we'll go to a little website you probably never heard of called Craigslist. Mm-hmm. And we use a software program called postingdomination.com/the land geek. And with the press of a button, we can put out about 128 ads, automated. So we use that for Craigslist and for Facebook buy sell groups. And within 30 days, we'll typically have that property sold. And then the way I like to sell it is, this is where the magic happens, right? So I'll sell it for about $2,500 down at about a car payment of $449 a month at 9% interest over 10 years. And now for the next 10 years, I've got $449 a month coming in every single month without renters, without rehabs, without renovations, without rodents. Nothing to maintain, nothing to protect. And this is why I've got a podcast called the Best Passive Income Model Podcast. Tim, is there anything better?
Wow, it sounds great to me. And then if they stop paying, then the land goes right back to you and you just do it again, huh?
Right. So there's no cost of foreclosure because we use a land contract. So we don't deed that property over until they pay off that promissory note. Exactly. And then we get another down payment and someone else paying another note payment.
That's excellent. Now, have you ever calculated approximately maybe how many hours of kind of research and work that kind of goes into a typical, property that you find? And once you find it, you kind of do your due diligence, you find the owner, and you kind of go through all this. What are people looking at? Like, 20 hours or 30 hours of their time in trying to nail down a property?
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I first started, that's probably what it would take is, maybe 5 to 10 hours to do a deal. And today with software, we're 90% automated. And it literally takes, between the paperwork and everything I just described, I'd say less than an hour a day to work this business.
Well, that's great. That's excellent. So it sounds like you're all about automation. You're all about making it easy, fast, efficient.
Delegation. For example, that due diligence, we pay $11 for our due diligence to a title guy in the Philippines. So it's all automated. It's all delegated. We have a whole team.
Well, that is fantastic. Now, how did you get into this, Mark? When did you first kind of make your buy? How many years ago? And how did you end up having the idea to kind of teach others to do it?
Sure. So I started in about 2000, and I was a very unhappy, very miserable investment banker. And I was working in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups, mid-market companies like, 5 to 500 million, nothing too crazy. And I had a 45-minute commute to work and back. I was micromanaged. It was high pressure. It was long hours. And it got so bad, Tim, that I wouldn't get the Sunday blues anticipating Monday coming along. I'd get the Friday blues anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday. So my firm hires this guy, and he tells me that on the side, he's going to these tax deed auctions, and he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar, and he's flipping them online, and he's making on average a 300% return on his investment. Well, I'm looking at companies all day, and a great company has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow, right? Great company. Your average company is at 10%, and I'm looking at companies all day long less than 10%. So I have $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I go to this auction in New Mexico. I buy 10 half-acre parcels for an average price of $300. And then I do exactly what he says. I flip them online. The next week, they all sell for an average price of over $1,200. So I take all of that money, and I go to another tax deed auction in Arizona where I live, and there's no one in the room. Again, this is 2000. I buy up all this property. And the next 6 months, I sell it all. I make over $90,000 cash. So I go to my wife, who's pregnant at the time, by the way. I say, honey, I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to invest in land full time. She says, absolutely not. So I said, okay, fine. So I did it part time for 18 months until the land investing income exceeded the investment banking income, and I've been doing it full time ever since. And I started teaching in about, I think 2000, maybe 2012. I started teaching it.
Well, that's excellent, and I love that story, and I've had just a little bit of experience flipping land, but not here in the States, over in Costa Rica, and I did okay, and that was a lot of fun. Who was the guy? I'm trying to think, because there've been several people out there who've talked about either buying land or buying property. What was the story of Carlton Cheese? Do you remember him?
Carlton Cheese was a housing guy. He wasn't land. I don't know what happened to him. But there's no sleazier business than real estate information. Those late night infomercial guys.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's really sleazy because they're talking about deals that they did 10 years ago. They're not still doing it anymore. They're making all their money from information.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember I never met Carlton Cheese, but I saw his yacht down at we used to have a small sailboat down in Daytona Beach, Florida, and he had parked his yacht at the end of our dock, and he had his captain come down and talk to us every now and then, and they would have these wild parties at night. He had this disco floor, and I remember the disco ball and the lights coming out of the windows and the music, and he was just having a blast. But that's why his name came to mind. But a lot of people have gotten, I guess, the property bug from these flipping shows. Has that been helpful to keep real estate on people's minds?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for sure. I think that it makes it look sexy. It makes it look fun. Absolutely. I think it does.
Right. Now, in the United States, over in Costa Rica, when I had purchased land, there's what they call squatters' rights, and people who can move onto your land if they can prove they've been there for a couple of months. They can have rights to that land, and you can't get rid of them. Is there anything like that here in the States?
No, there's not. In fact, I had a squatter in Colorado, and we had to spend a little bit of money and got him off the property.
Okay, so it's not that big of a deal.
Him off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, what are kind of a couple of tips you would have for people who are starting out without a lot of money, who are just kind of going, it sounds very interesting, and how to get started in buying and selling land?
So the first thing is you got to get a list of the properties. So you go to the the county treasurer and ask for the tax delinquent list, and then you start doing your research on the comparable sales, and you do exactly what I said. You divide by 4, and you send out those offers, and then you do your due diligence, make sure that they own the property, and you can do that very easily by contacting the county recorder, and we have all types of information out there to help you with it. And then you buy the property, and then you just send out a neighbor letter, and you send out letters to the neighbors. And usually what will happen is I had a client, he had no money. He had money for mailings. And what he would do is he would actually just lock up the property, and he would say, hey, look, I'm going to buy this property, but it's going to take me 90 days to do due diligence. Well, it takes about 3 days to do due diligence. So during that time, he sent out neighbor letters, and he started marketing the property. Well, he pre-sold the property to the neighbor, took the money from the neighbor, and then bought the property and did a double closing. So he had an infinite ROI and didn't have to use any of his own money. So I started with $3,000. My buddy Duran started with $800. He's a multimillionaire. You don't need a lot of money, honestly.
Now, are there any properties that you would warn people to stay away from? I'm kind of thinking of, here in the U.S., we've been hit by hurricanes and fires out west. Are there any properties that you would just kind of stay away from?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would stay away from a lot of the East Coast because of, super fun sites, and it's very expensive out there. So I only focus on the Sunshine States, the Southwest, a little bit the Northwest, and Florida. I avoid the whole other rest of the country. Because, look, nobody's going to wake up and think to themselves, boy, I'd really love to buy some raw land today in Arkansas. Unless you live in Arkansas, right? But if it's California, all these other websites, or not websites, all these other states, Texas, that have lots of inexpensive land, very few people out there. It really, there's a lust for land in this country.
Sure.
You'd be shocked by it.
Now, Mark, what keeps you motivated on a daily basis?
Well, I think the fact that, when people say to me, hey, Mark, because of you, you retired my spouse. Because of you, I'm able to travel the world now, and we quit my job. Because of you, I was able to replace my income and quit my job. That's so fulfilling for me, as opposed to when I was just buying and selling raw land. I was helping 5 people, absolutely, my family. But now that I'm teaching people and having that impact in other people's lives, it keeps me motivated to get better and better and better and stay sharp in my own land investing business. And I love it. There's nothing like it.
Now, has there been a time since you've started out, you went off on your own, where you just kind of mentally were feeling stressed out and just super challenged, and you didn't know if you could overcome it? Can you share a situation like that? And what did you do?
Sure. Well, I remember in 2010, I was actually really profitable in 2008 and 2009. But 2010 comes around, all of a sudden, people stop paying on their notes. And about half my income just goes away. And, have you heard of like Parkinson's law of money?
No.
So the more money you have, the more money you spend.
Oh,
They usually
yes.
talk about time, right?
Right.
So, I have 3 kids, and sure enough, like, it's the more money I made, the more money we spent. So I had to get the big house. I got the big cars. I had a nanny 5 days a week. I had a cleaning lady 5 days a week. My wife didn't work, by the way. We had private schools. And all of a sudden, my income gets hit 50%. And we were just out of control. And so now, it was very stressful to get rid of all this stuff that we became sort of used to in a way, and really kind of get back to, oh my gosh, this is what's really important in life. And so instead of going out for a big steak dinner on Saturday night, we'd stay home and cook and play charades with the kids. And it was way, way better, way more simple. And that lesson has stayed with me today as I've come back financially, to really live by your own, what's really important, to live by the values of it. And but during that time, oh boy, was it stressful.
Well, it sounds like it was a painful situation, but there was a great learning experience that came from that. And so it sounds like it really shaped where you are today and how you live. And, you shared earlier that, you really enjoy being able to give people that kind of financial freedom and security. So I assume, this is kind of really your purpose and your focus going forward.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It really is. I want to impact as many people's lives as I can. I like to say I want to be the pebble in the pond, right? So, Tim, if I can remove money stress from your life, right, and you're working because you want to, not because you have to, and your passive income exceeds your fixed expenses, and suddenly it frees up oceans of energy for you to go out and contribute to the world in ways that you never thought possible, and experience things in the world you never thought possible. And I think that ripples out, then it affects all your relationships, because you're lighter, you're more carefree, you're less stressed out. And I really think that it ripples out and touches everyone that you touch, and then they're in a better mood because, oh my gosh, Tim's provided all this joy for me, and then they're better, and it just kind of goes on and on.
Well, it sounds like, Mark, you're not in the business of land. You're in the business of changing lives, and I like that. But unfortunately, we're at the end of the show, Mark. But before we go, where can people find you online and on social media?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is thelandgeek.com and start there. And in the Twitter sphere, I think I'm at The Land Geek, and Facebook, it's just facebook.com/The Land Geek.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mark. This has been a pleasure, and I look forward to learning more about The Land Geek.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlascos.com.